Hello, and welcome to the BCN and Friends podcast, where we have real conversations about learning, leadership, and the lived experiences of nurses and healthcare professionals across the emergency spectrum. Each episode, we sit down with thought leaders, BCN certification holders, and industry experts who share their stories, their insights, and the challenges that shape their work. Our mission is simple: to amplify the voices of those making a difference every day, because your experiences drive progress, inspire others, and shape the future of nursing. We're here to honor that in every episode. Sometimes funny, sometimes serious, and always valuable. This is BCN and Friends, and we're so glad you're here.
In this episode, we're joined by Antrell Rainey for a powerful conversation on leadership, mentorship, and the life experiences that shape how we lead. We will explore what high reliability care looks like, the lessons leaders can learn from history, and how both challenges and relationships influence meaningful change. Antrell shares practical insight and a mindset shift for anyone working to lead within complex systems. This episode is titled, Growing Through Mentorship in the Rainy Seasons.
I'm Holly Briggs, a professional development specialist at BCN and one of your hosts for today. I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Dexter, our Director of Professional Development. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Holly.
It's great to have you with us. In this episode, we are going beyond the bedside and into the systems that shape how care is delivered and experienced. To help us explore that space, we're joined by Antrell Rainey, a healthcare leader whose clinical background and personal journey as a parent navigating healthcare complexities now drive his work across healthcare organizations. Michael, could you please introduce us to our BCN friend, Antrell?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be happy to. Antrell and I actually connected online. I was reached out to by somebody from alumni relations from the university that I attended, and they were looking for a mentor for someone in the healthcare field. And I assumed it was nursing, and then found out later that Antrell is not a nurse, but definitely is very experienced in the healthcare field. He's an MBA prepared executive leader. He's a clinical professional. He's a patient advocate. He has more than 14 years of experience working with high acuity pediatric and substance abuse populations. And his understanding of healthcare operations goes beyond the classroom. He's had to navigate the healthcare system as the parent of a medically fragile child with a severe heart defect. And so Antrell brings both his clinical background, his leadership training, as well as very personal stories to help healthcare organizations improve reliability, strengthen their operations, and create systems that better support both patients and frontline staff. Antrell, welcome to the BCN and Friends podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Holly and Michael, for the invite. I'm excited.
Well, we are excited to chat with you. I know you and Michael have kind of a long-standing relationship through your connection through the Alumni Association, and you guys have been chatting monthly and really, honestly, when Michael talked to me about you coming on the podcast, there's just something to be said of having shared perspectives and people with perspective that's different from that of the traditional nursing perspective, or even within that, core healthcare team that we kind of shine a light on through the podcast. So I'm excited for you to be with us. So the first thing I want to ask is if you could just kind of walk us through your career path from working as a clinical professional and a patient advocate, then you pursued your MBA. And so kind of what motivated you to go from that clinical care into executive leadership with that kind of business mindset?
Thanks for the question. So I started way back 14 years ago in case management. It was really my first job. So I didn't really understand the gravity of what I was getting into. But as I progressed in that field, I was able to start to understand the importance of what case managers do for families, especially from dealing with the type of higher acuity kids that we provide service to. And with me doing that career, I was blessed with opportunities, and then I went into patient advocacy. And patient advocacy is a little bit more of a touchy subject for me simply because of my daughter. I had a lot of people who advocated on behalf of her, and once I was uh, tasked with the opportunity to be a patient advocate for our kids, I just took it head on. It was something I felt like I was charged to do, right? Someone did it for me, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it for someone else, and I'm gonna make sure that, hey, they have they have the skills they need to be able to advocate for themselves. I will say that the reason how I got into my MBA is I realized that when you're at the case management level, you typically deal with things from a case by case at the ground level. And I started to notice that, a lot of systems and things of that nature were causing a lot of gaps for people. And in order for me to kind of reach that full potential, I wanted to look at it from the whole aspect of leadership from the janitor all the way up to the C-suite. I wanted to make sure that I understood the whole gravity. Everything that I experienced with my daughter, I took it and I molded it into my what I'm doing in my career now.
And so, Antrell, you've mentioned your daughter several times. I mentioned your daughter. Why don't you just go ahead and let the listeners know a little bit more about her? She was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome.
Mhm.
So maybe go through what that diagnosis means, what it means for the family side, maybe not necessarily the professional side, but just the family side. And then maybe once you've gone through that, just a little bit more about how that has changed you as a professional as well. I'd love to hear that.
Yes, my daughter, she was diagnosed with hyperplastic left heart syndrome way, way back in 2009. I would say that the medical term for that is basically her fourth ventricle didn't fully develop when she was a baby, or when she was in her mom's womb. And because of that, it was hard for her body to oxygenate blood. With that heart defect, you have to have three different surgeries. Now, from a parent perspective, I will say whenever someone talks about hyperplastic left heart syndrome, the number one thing you all that comes to me is fear and the unknown because I was 20 years old. I had never heard of this before. I didn't know what to expect or what to look for. It was all such a daunting experience, right? You go from not really knowing anything to boom, hey, your kid life is different. Even she was probably like 2 or 3 days old, and they was like, well, there is a possibility that she could require a heart transplant. I'm 20 years old. I'm scared. I'm like, man, what? Like, I was planning on my daughter to be a basketball player. So, and that was far from what I was expecting to go through with my daughter and how that shaped my experiences is that I always try my best to give Children's Hospital here in Little Rock, Arkansas, the biggest pat on their back because for a family being so young, 19 and 20, all this change was so daunting. It was so scary. But I will say that the group of people we had with us, they made the change so small that when we finally took her home it wasn't so daunting. It wasn't so scary. We knew that we had the skills to be able to care for her. And also, if we had any questions, Children's did a amazing job of making sure that, hey, we can call and they're going to get right back to us.
Yeah. And so as they were working with you and as this was all brand new for you, I'm sure the last thing you were thinking about is process improvement and change and these things. But, as you started becoming more accustomed to this, challenging diagnosis that you were given, tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you started recognizing in the healthcare industry that really gave you a deeper appreciation for when things go well and when
Mhm.
processes are smooth, and then when there's room for improvement that's so obvious to be seen, but yet it still just seems to perpetuate the same cycle of needing improvement, but not actually seeing that improvement happen.
Right, right. So off the top of my mind, I always lead with vague communication. When you have a child who health requires everyone to be on the same page, we can't have any vague communication because one mix up could be her life and it's too valuable, right? So it taught me to understand the purpose of we have to have those hard communications, them hard conversations. When my daughter first was getting ready to come home, Children's had that hard conversation about what our life would look like what her life would look like, and we had to actually sit down and say, hey, how are we going to do this? But they didn't sugarcoat anything. Like pretty much everything they told us about how her life and things were going to go, it went to a T to a certain extent. So I was very appreciative of the fact that we didn't have to worry about too many surprises. That in and right there let me understand the importance of leadership, right? Because we don't want to be report to someone who has vague communication. Oh, you did a good job, or you didn't do a good job. We want to know details, like what's actually going on. Another thing is at children's, and you all, I'm always gonna draw on that on my experience with her. Whenever my daughter was getting medicine, I would literally see them scan the medicine, doo, go scan her wristband, doo, and I think they scanned the medicine again, right? And I was like, man, I wonder why they doing that all the time. Like, what's the point of all this? And then, like you said, Michael, I started to think about process improvement. Is like, you know what? They can't afford to give her the wrong medicine. So and then that let me understand the purpose of doing things intentionally every single time, so that you don't have to worry about someone having to be tired or going outside the scope of what they're supposed to do. You know that, hey, before you give this medicine, you're supposed to scan this valve, and then you scan her arm to make sure that the medicine is matching up with the kid. And so things like that I noticed. I was like, man, okay, so if I'm ever in leadership, I understand that I need to be intentional and I need to map the system out so that it's really hard to mess up.
Tell us a little bit more about the system because you talk about navigating the system, but your job is also helping others navigate systems as well. And so talk to us a little bit more about how that has changed for you with your work you're currently doing in helping others navigate these systems and then using some of those concepts as well. How have you seen opportunities to improve those processes in your own workplace or help family members even advocate more for their own family to say like we need a little bit more clarity in some of these processes or we need more education or be more of an advocate on their own?
Right, right. So with me personally, as far as in my day to day, one of the things that I think we all can agree on is meetings, right? Meetings can feel like a waste of time most of the time, right? So, and some of them you just can't get out of. You could try to process your way out of everything, but there's some things you just can't get out of, right? But the ones we can control, something that I started to do was use what is called the highest paid person in the room, like a hippo effect. And instead of the person who makes the most money speaks the most, it's the person closest to the situation speaks. And so what I started doing in my meetings was ensuring that the families were speaking the most. And because they're the expert on their kids. We're just really just meeting these kids and meeting them, but eventually they have to go back home. And so the most important information we can get is from those families. And what that ended up doing, you all, was it just made the meetings more interesting, and we was able to get things done. One, because the families led the meetings. They didn't just feel like they was being lectured to, and that was a big aspect.
I've just been sitting back listening to you chat not only about like your firsthand experience with your daughter. What was her name? I wanted
Teenager. Uh-huh.
Tanasia. So your experience with Tanasia and how that kind of, I mean, I can't imagine being 19, 20 years old and having to take care of a child with a congenital heart defect. Like even as a nurse with a very basic grasp of what that is,
Mhm.
would still feel very overwhelmed to suddenly have to be an expert in a diagnosis such as that at 19 or 20. So kudos to you and your family and just I love how you said like the healthcare team that was taking care of Tunisia, how they just kind of surrounded you guys and communicated well. They communicated like not only what to expect, but gave you an idea of how you can find some type of comfort in knowing like here's how things will probably progress. Here's what you can expect. Here would be things to look for. Like when you said those hard conversations, I think about patients who, have left my care and they have to go home and do hard things. A lot of times it's things for a period of time. It's usually a very brief period of time if it's like an acute injury or something like that. But for
Yeah.
you guys, like hey, this is going to change the dynamic of your family and how you day to day operate. So I love that you had such great things to say about the communication you received and also how you found comfort in knowing like they laid out for us a plan, they laid out for us expectations, and that somehow gave us just a little bit of peace to go home with something that's so heavy. So I thought that was just really beautiful the way that you phrased that. And I think that when you're in the hospital and you're working in the hospital, all of these processes are going on all the time, and you almost become like unaware of them in a way. Like, you're verifying the patient, you're verifying the you're doing these things, you're clicking the medical record. Like, all of these things are happening, but you're not actually like thinking about them all the time. And truthfully, I'll be honest with you, I would not think about those processes until they saved me from doing something wrong. And then I'd be like, oh, thank goodness we have that in place. And
Right.
so it almost becomes like white noise that you kind of start tuning it out. But I think it's really cool that as a parent, you saw that and thought, that's actually really smart. Like, humans are going to probably make an error. And if we're
Right.
not
Right.
careful, if we don't put systems in place to help check those things and to help keep us in line, then we might do something inadvertently, not trying to harm anybody, but it could happen. And so I love that you saw that, like, we need systems that create reliability and uniformity, but not taking away the human connection, right? I think that is such a huge part of what you were talking about. And man, I also love when you were like, look, letting the most important person, the one closest to the problem, talk the most, because it reminded me sometimes as a nurse, you just want to do your
Mhm.
thing and like get out. I know you want to tell me your whole life story, but I gotta go see another patient, right? Sometimes you think that, but I learned in my career if I would just openly ask a question and let somebody talk while I was putting out the stuff to draw their blood and getting the medicines ready. And I would just, oh, so what's going on? And like let people talk. It would be amazing sometimes what
Right.
patients and their family members would just tell you. And it would
Mhm.
really shape the way that you gave them care because
Mhm.
you kind of got insight into maybe what they were most worried about, what they what they expected to hear or not hear. And that actually just helped me know, like, hey, this is a person who's going to need me to check on them a lot. Like, they're super worried, they're super nervous. Or somebody's like, I'm just here, I just want to know what it is, and then I want to go home. You learn so much when you're able to just kind of let that person talk. So I love that too. I feel like if we could embrace that as healthcare professionals, to recognize that the most important person in a patient room is the patient, if they can talk to you, if they can communicate. And then secondary to them is going to be that family member who they usually have a whole lot of insight.
Yeah, they have everything you need, right?
Oh my goodness. Oh, especially for like our chronic kids, like the kids who had, who had been born with illness or who had developed them young. Like I'd be like, you check on the patient, but I'd be like, okay, so what are you concerned about? Parent, caregiver, what are you concerned? Like, what's worrying you today? Because that would normally be like, okay, that's what I need to be worried about more than anything else. So I feel like I could go back and ask some more questions, but then our podcast will be like 2 hours. So we probably can't do that. That'll probably be a two-parter. Oh, Lord. Well, when you and I first met, you talked a lot about some different organizational history and medical history, and you really seem to be like a guru of a lot of different like places that develop processes, responding to unexpected crises. So maybe tell me a little bit about why those stories you're so drawn to, and then also which lessons do you think healthcare leaders today still kind of underestimate from those kind of stories?
What you're referencing is the newsletters that I write. I write a newsletter bi-weekly on Substack. It's called Rainey on Leadership, and I do deep dives once a month. And with that, I go deep into organizations who've been around for a long time. But if you've been around for 100 years, you've had more than your fair of lumps and bruises along the way. It's just part of it, right? So, and you mentioned a story that I wrote about was Johnson and Johnson, and that was one of the first ones I wrote. I was initially learning about Johnson and Johnson and the Tylenol issue that they had back in the 80s. I had never knew about it, but then as I learned about Tylenol and the fact that I believe it was like 7 people who ended up dying from contaminated Tylenol pills, and one thing that Tylenols CEO did was he just followed their credo, right? He just basically did what was established, and I believe it was 1943 that the company put that they will always put their customers first. And he was told, hey, don't take all the medicine off. And he ended up taking all the medicine off and so that everyone will be safe. And I believe it ended up costing Johnson & Johnson like $100 million. But it didn't hurt them in the long run because the consumers, if you see that this person is willing to eat $100 million to get all of the product off of the shelves, then you still have that sense of trust with them, right? And so in the midst of that, I was learning and learning. I said, I wonder if Johnson Johnson had anything else happen besides that. And then I found out about the Motrin scandal that they had in 2008, 2009. And I'm like, okay, so surely if you went through a crisis in 1980s, right? You had the blueprint. They showed you everything you need to do to withstand a crisis, that you would just follow that plan. Well, nope, new people in leadership, and they decided to be secretive, right? And so instead of doing what the previous regime did and spending that upfront cost, they end up costing them like $1.5 billion, and their reputation, the stock took a hit. And just to go back on that Johnson and Johnson, and because of that, now I know why I get mad when I open up medicine. It's because of the packaging that they changed because of the contaminated pills. So it's like man, I gotta open this box. I gotta twist the top. Then I gotta take the aluminum foil thing off. Then I gotta pull the cotton out of it. So that's something I enjoy learning about because it gives me a way to look inside the C-suite's mind and how they operate. I do think that something that the leaders can take away, and this is something that I just recently wrote about, which is Best Buy, is that oftentimes you have what you need already in your organization to fix the changes. You don't have to go outside. You have people doing great work already. Just empower them and give them the tools and the resources they need to continue to do great work.
Love what you said about the difference between admitting, like, hey, there's a problem and we want to make it right,
Mhm.
and being like, maybe they won't find out and not talking about it. There's a bunch of studies out there that show when an error happens in healthcare, because again, I mentioned like we're humans, right? Working with humans. So that is a recipe for an error to happen at some point, right? But like I said, studies have shown that when the healthcare team is actually honest and admits the error, the patients are less likely to go down the route of litigation as long as they make it right. It should remind us that people understand humans can mess up sometimes, like we'll make a mistake. But if we're honest about it and we bring that to them and we want to make it right, there can sometimes be grace for that. And obviously, every situation is different. Sometimes there are proper reasons to get into litigation, absolutely. But I love how you said, like, just that honesty aspect and how you could see it from such a huge company that, like, hey, it was handled one way, and this was, even the financial cost. Yeah, it was still a costly thing, but years down the road when it was kind of covered up, actually ended up costing them way more financially, and just that reputation that you spoke to. And I think we as leaders and those who can continue to try to advocate for lessons learned is that mistakes are going to happen inevitably the longer you stay in healthcare. Like, it's going to happen. How can we own those, and how can we try to work to make it right? And just a level of transparency and honesty, I think, it's the right thing to do. I know it can feel pretty scary, but I like that. I'm going to drop the link for your Substack in the blog for this. So if you're listening to this episode and you're like, oh, I want to know what else is out there. Don't worry. I will link Antrell's Substack to you. Don't worry. And speaking of people listening, for nurses and healthcare leaders listening to this episode who might feel stuck inside broken systems, because they are out there, what's one mindset shift or an action that you believe can make the biggest difference or a big impact on them right now as they continue to, try to navigate what can be really difficult and very frustrating? I feel like there's a level of frustration that comes with broken systems. So,
Mhm.
what advice do you have for us?
One of the things that I always speak to is removing the heroism. In healthcare, we typically want to go above and beyond, do the extra thing, stay late, do extra work, pick up another case. But a lot of time, oftentimes, heroism just leads to burnout. And I often say that, hey, take a step back and start being a reliability architect and just look and see what's actually going on. Oftentimes, we can't fix the overall system, right? But we can make adjustments to our day to day. I have a quick story. I had a friend who works in healthcare, and I said, "Hey, I need to be a can you be a guinea pig?" And she was like, "Yeah, of course." And she was having some troubles as far as with her day and as far as hiring meetings and outreaches and things of that nature. And so we sat down, and what we did was I put her through this thing called a five whys, and it just was we was able to get down to some root causes of why things was happening as far as her being agitated and it was just a lot. Her work schedule was all over the place. And after we ran it through a five whys and we was able to just really look at her schedule, we was able to actually put together a workflow for her that freed up time for her. And I told her, I said, so this is what I call about being a reliability architect, right? You're still working the same amount of hours, but now we've cut out some redundant tasks, right? So now you understand that, hey, if I do this, it's gonna lead to this, so we might as well not even do it, right? So, and she was very appreciative because more importantly, it gave her one to two more hours to do the work that she needs to do for her clients. So that's what I would say. Take a step back and look and see what you can actually change in your day to day. It helped me out as well.
There's so many of those things that we can't change, and that is the frustrating part. But there's ways, I think there's different avenues to do that. There's the things you can't change, but there's a potential for the future. Then there's other things that you can't change because it's not within your scope or your purvey to do so. Like if I'm a nurse or a nurse's aide, and this is something that only a physician is capable to do,
Right.
and the only way I can change that is if I become the physician or if we can work together differently. But then there's other things that I think people get frustrated sometimes because they want to see the change, but they want to see it in a time frame that is just not practical to them. And it is hard sometimes to realize like these are things I can't have any control over. And so I need to focus my time and effort on the things that I can. And that's something that I think all of us have to continuously remind ourselves of is what do I actually have the power to change, power to control, and the things that I don't, being able to not only recognize these, but being able to understand that because of that, I need to change my attitude and then hopefully change the atmosphere around me for it. And it's hard to do, especially in a high acuity or high risk environment when there's so many things going on and you see the need. But I think for me, that's also one of the core components of nursing is advocacy, whether it's patient advocacy, whether it's professional advocacy. There's so many things that we should not give up on, but at the
Mhm.
same sense, in the moment when there's not an option to change it, to be able to understand that and keep the right attitude around it is a bit of an art. So.
Yes, yes, yes. It's like you said, Michael. There are certain things we just can't change, right? And that's the frustrating part of going to work. And the only way we can change it is if we go and become Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, right? Then we'll be able to change those things. But for most of us, we can't. And it just goes back to what I had mentioned earlier, you all about meetings. I can't get out of meetings. I have to have those meetings with families. But I can make sure that I change those meetings so that we don't have to hear those famous words. Let's circle back. Hey, let's circle back to this next week. And then we do it again and do it again. And like you said, Michael, that mindset shift was really key for me as far as just controlling what I can control. The need to try to fix everything, that's something that I kind of struggled with when I was younger. And it burns you out, and then you're at work, you're upset, frustrated, and now you're not even focused on what you need to focus on, which is the patient.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And I do think you're right. It's very much tied into the whole burnout conversation, I think, is the way that people see that there's a need for change, but their inability to be that change that they want it to be. And again, it's not always the fact that it can't be changed. It's just in the moment, maybe it can't be. And yeah, I see the frustration why, but that should never make somebody give up completely. There's opportunity to grow, opportunity to advance, opportunity to advocate, and all of these things can bring change in the future. It's just hard being in the moment and wanting the change, and you can't have it then. But you've grown, Antrell, and you've seen a lot. We've talked about personal with your daughter. We've talked about your career and what you've done, and then some of the newer things that you're doing. But in all of that, we always like to ask people about a certain person or certain time, somebody that really influenced you as an individual, or maybe you saw your career going a certain way or saw your family life going a certain way and something happened and that was a defining moment for you. Is there anybody in particular or any time in particular that you look back at and you go, I probably wouldn't be who I am today or where I am today without this happening?
Yes, when that's it's for me, it's always going to be the same person, right? And that's my mom, right? So, and the reason why I'm always going to say my mom is because that's always been my rock. That's been my foundation. Again, when I was being so young and not knowing which way to go as far as how to handle a kid with special needs, my mom from an early age instilled my foundation of faith. And my faith is the reason why I was able to continue to navigate those things. Even when I became frustrated about how certain things might go on my daughter's path, I can look at my phone and my mom will send me a text message, and that text message is a scripture. The scripture is exactly what I'm going through, So it's those days to where that my mom she's poured a lot into to not only me but my siblings as well, and I'm forever appreciative. I can honestly say that I know I wouldn't be where I am today without her guidance and her prayers.
What is your mom's name, Antrell?
Velma Rainey.
Miss Velma Rainey, I don't know when you're going to listen to this episode, but you could fast forward all the way to this part right here and just know that your son beautifully articulated what most parents want to hear at when their children are grown up is that you did an amazing job of not only laying a great foundation, but continuing to encourage your son through hard times. It's great to celebrate with family. It's great to celebrate with friends, like those high moments, like mountaintop. Oh, it's so nice. But I think it says a lot about family, a lot about friends when they are with you through those really heavy and hard times and that they continue to just, try to sprinkle a thought, whether that be a scripture or a positive message or just, hey, I'm checking on you, I'm praying for you, I'm thinking about you, whether it be a unexpected snail mail or just, like, hey, I'm bringing you coffee. I think there's just so many ways, little ways. Sometimes it's not the big things, but it's the million tiny little things that someone does throughout the course of your life that inspire you and bring you along. So, Ms. Velma, great job. And to all the parents out there who are wondering, am I doing okay? You know what? It takes a lot of million little things and keep doing those little things because they will amount to big things. Who knows? Your kid might be on a podcast thanking you one day. We can only hope, right? Michael and I are like, please, Lord, let our children get on a podcast where they thank us for our awesomeness. Well, Antrell, we're going to move into some rapid fire questions. And why do we ask these? Because we just want to get to know you a little bit better as a person. And so, my first question is what would you be doing if you were not in your current role? So, maybe like a career, a job that you thought maybe I would definitely like to try this.
I think Michael would know what I do on my part time is I coach Pee Wee sports, keep Pee Wee basketball. I would 100% be a high school basketball coach if I wasn't in healthcare.
Like encouraging the youths, right? Those young people with those big NBA dreams, right? And they're
Right,
like
right,
5 years old.
right.
You're like, you can't
Yeah.
even reach the rim, kid. But they got big dreams. And that's awesome that you encourage them. And what I found about sports in general, especially when it's, elementary through high school, I feel like it's not just, yes, you learn the rules of like a game, but you learn like teams, you learn how to communicate with other people your age. If you want to win, it can't be about one person. And so I think it's so cool that that would be what you would want to do is work Sometimes I like go to these little sports games with like my nieces and nephews, and I'm like, these poor coaches wrangling a bunch of cats around, like just trying to keep them focused. T-ball, that is just,
Yes.
you're in for a good time. And who knows? I think it's still an option. Who knows? Okay, three categories of favorites. Here we go. What is your favorite book or maybe a quote that really inspires you?
It's kind of hard to say a favorite book. I will say a book that helped me on my journey, which is Think Again by Adam Grant. I came across Adam Grant when I was taking my organizational behavior class in my MBA program. And one of the things that I learned from that book is that who you are and your values, that's your rock, that's your foundation. But we should be constantly challenging our beliefs. And so often we will believe something just because, oh, my grandma said this back in 1991, right? But we never even took the chance to see if it was even true. So, in another valuable lesson, I think it's called the scientific theory, or well, when we was in school, you had to form your hypothesis and do all that. He talks about how if we remove the need to be right and the fear of being wrong, then you will be able to actually start to grow. And so once I read that book, that it was just like a light went off in my head. I was like, man, we got some work to do.
I'll be honest, for years, I mean, there's so many of those, like you
Right,
said, grandmaisms. I used to believe like the whole you have to wait 30 minutes before you go swimming because let's get that's what everybody says, right? And then it wasn't until I was in healthcare for a few years that I found out that that is not true whatsoever. Like it has
right,
no bearing on whether. So I'm like all the time as a child that I sat out by the side of the pool because I couldn't go swimming right after I was eating because you just throw up and you feel sick. Lies. It has, I
right,
mean, I'm sure that probably came from like seeing a bunch of kids run around and like get super hyped up and then they throw up. And so it became like an urban legend. But I think that idea of just challenging beliefs, I've definitely had some different leaders really impact and impart to me the idea of like staying curious. That at the end of the day, you may reinforce the belief you have, you may shift it, but if you can just stay curious in life, whether that be reading different books from different perspectives, meeting people from different walks of life, whatever that might be, just being curious will help you to broaden the network that you have and then those inputs that you have. I think there's something really wise to that and just approaching it with curiosity and just asking questions like, so why do you do that? I think there's something beautiful about that. So I definitely wrote that book down. I appreciate always a good book recommendation. All right, moving on. Favorite movie, TV show, a binge-worthy series that you'd recommend to us.
Okay, so listen, I'm gonna have to say two, right? So my favorite movie. All right, so I get a lot of flack for this, right? I promise you. My favorite movie is Beauty and the Beast, right? That's a movie I can watch all the time. It don't matter. I can just come on and put it on, right? I don't know. I guess it's linked to my childhood memories. Could be, but um, and then I'm a '90s kid, right? So I will also say my favorite, and I think is one of the best shows of all time. I still watch to this day is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Like I'm just a nostalgia kid. I still watch it. So them on my two. I will say them on my two.
You know what? I do have to ask you to differentiate for me. You are talking about the original animated one, not the live action one that came out.
No, you talking about Beauty and the Beast? Yes, I'm talking
Yes,
about the
sorry.
the,
Beauty
the
and the
back.
Beast.
Yeah,
We're
yes,
talking
yes.
about the original anime. Okay, okay,
Original.
okay.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay.
That one. That one.
Okay.
That one.
Perfect. I had to because a part of me was like, if he's talking live action Beauty and the Beast, we
Nah.
might be at an inroads in our conversation. Um, Good thing he recommended a great book. No, so yeah, the original animated one, and then yes, the Power Rangers. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, there was a clip playing on one of my social media threads, and my daughter, she was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "It's the Power Rangers," and she was, "Is that like a joke?" And I was like, "Get away!" They were saving the world and the environment from everything long before you were a thought in my heart. So technology as far as like film has really come along and you can
Right.
you dial it back like 20, 25 years and you're like, whoa, we found this impressive. simplicity.
Right.
Sometimes what I have to remind myself. Okay, favorite song, musical artist, something that can instantly move you.
Okay, so right now at this moment, my son, he's a Giveon fan. He's an R&B singer, and that's the dude I've been. I come in here and he's blasting it, and so anytime I hear that, I just get in a good mood because it's good music, right? It's soothing. So Giveon, I think he just had a new CD, so my son been playing the mess out of that CD.
Oh, that's awesome. I like a good chill vibe, but I will say that sometimes artists know their lane and know like this is who I am and they're not trying to be somebody else and I do feel like he embodies that a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, I always like wonder like does the label have something to do with like I'm like suspect sometimes when people come out with songs and I'm like, is this one you chose? Or they were like, no, you have to sing this one, but I still love
Yeah.
music, so I'm definitely listening. Okay. Final question from this rapid fire section. Do you have a self-care go-to or something that helps you reset? Because you're doing a lot of things. You have, your main job, you have this consulting that you do, you have this Substack that you're writing, you've got your family. I mean, you're doing a lot. So what do you do to kind of help you reset and take care of yourself?
Okay, so I will say that the main thing for me is I go to the park and I just let the windows down and I just give myself 30 minutes. Now, what happens in those 30 minutes? I don't know. Sometimes I have to let it out, right? Because of life. And when I mean let it out, I mean shed some tears. And then sometimes I just sit there and just look outside and look at two squirrels chase each other, right? Or just see two birds flying by. It gives me an opportunity to just to be at peace and collect my thoughts. I do recommend, if you can, to go walking. Find something positive to do with your time because our thoughts, they are with us at all times, and it's always good to have a positive outlet.
Connecting with nature, going for a walk, giving yourself space. I think those things allow for your mind to maybe process through something. And even if the situation doesn't change, even if your thoughts or what you're thinking about, the concerns that you have don't change by the time you're done sitting for 30 minutes or walking or whatever that might be, there is just an internal peace that can come from that. There is a okay, I've thought about it. And even though it hasn't changed, like I've had a chance to kind of process. And sometimes it's just space for, like you said, those emotions that sometimes come from like heavy things. I mean, there would be many of times in the hospital when I would just be like, man, I could really cry about this, whatever that might be, but it wasn't appropriate. There wasn't space for it. But what I learned after a few years of just being like, no, no, I'll find time sometime, is that eventually it does come a calling. So if you want to do the right thing by yourself, it's to give yourself time every day to process through maybe those emotions or process through those thoughts and allow yourself the chance to let it run off. Because if not, it's coming. You're storing it up.
Mhm.
Eventually, you're going to have like the biggest cry fest and like blow up at somebody, and everybody's going to be like, what's happening? What's going on? And you've just met your capacity. You're over the top. So, if you
Right.
kind of want to avoid that, take Antrell's advice and go watch, a squirrel or two, watch some birds, catch a little nap, or just again, let yourself think through the things that you're walking through because if you don't do it now, you'll do it later. Um, so take that advice. That's great advice. All right. Last thing I wanted to talk about, social media. If any of our audience wanted to follow you online, I know we talked about your Substack, so I'm definitely going to link that. And then where else could they reach out to you online?
Yes, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. So it's going to be Antrell, Antrell, and then it's going to be Rainey, Rainey.
Perfect. And I will put both of those in the blog for this episode. So thanks for sharing that with us. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's been great chatting with you today, Antrell. And, as Holly mentioned, you and I meet just about once a month, and we have been for a while now. And, I did just want to put a plug in for anybody that's looking or considering mentorship options. I think it's a great thing. Antrell has certainly helped me, probably more than I've helped him. Sometimes I wonder how much of a help I can be, but We certainly, I think, have learned from each other. You have recommended multiple great books to me, and I was there for you with your MBA. And then when I went for my MBA, you were there for me. And so it's been a really great way to meet somebody, to learn from somebody. And if you're interested, whoever's listening, interested in mentorship opportunities, I think it's good for both sides to be involved in that. And it certainly has been for us. And Antrell, I've told you from the very first day that we met, you have a lot to share, you have a lot to give. You certainly have learned a lot over the course of time with both your personal and professional life. And for you to be able to share that on the podcast today has been really great. So thank you for taking the time with us today to do that. And we've really enjoyed chatting with you some more.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite, you all. And like Michael said, I'm really appreciative. And I do want to tell this story because I thought Michael was going to tell it, but he didn't. When I first started thinking about doing a mentorship at my university, I was like, man, I ain't doing this. I'm not going to do it. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to hit enter. Boom. I hit enter. And then they was taking the longest time to get me a mentor. I was like, man, I done emailed them a couple times. Hey, listen, are y'all still doing a mentorship? And they was like, yeah, we just trying to find you someone. And so the first time me and Michael met, of course, I was going over my situation as far as well as my daughter's, her heart condition. And I was telling them, hey, my daughter has hyperplastic left heart syndrome. That's her heart defect. And I was kind of skeptical at first. You don't know. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. But at the same time, when he told me that he had a background in it, I was like, you know what? It has to be nobody but God, right? Because I work in the healthcare field, but I don't come across people who even know what that heart condition is. And for him to be the person that's selected to be my mentor, I just said it has to be, right. And then I was his first business mentoree. So I just felt all of it lined up together. And again, I always tell Mike, I'm very appreciative of everything. He's been a wonderful helping hand to my life.
Well, thank you. It's a little daunting when they say we need you to mentor somebody in the healthcare space, and then you find out it's not a nurse, and you're like, oh, well, I feel great mentoring another nurse, but I don't know what I'm getting into with this, but definitely has. And I think, again, if somebody has thought about it, or they are looking for a mentor, or maybe they want to mentor somebody, but just a little hesitant, I would recommend, jump in with both feet and really do it, because I think it's a great opportunity for both people and a good way to grow as a professional, to interact more with others, grow your network, and just
Mm.
learn a lot about what it's like to help others. So it's a good thing. But thank you again, Antrell, and we really, really appreciate all of your insight and all that you've done. And I'm sure your mother will enjoy listening to this, but obviously, we certainly want to encourage a lot of the nursing community and any others that listen to this as well, that there is ways and opportunities out there to advocate for change and to look for opportunities, and to not get frustrated in the time that it takes for some of those things to come to fruition.
I couldn't have said it better. I'm going to take a moment to thank Antrell for joining us for this episode of Be Seen and Friends. Antrell, thank you for sharing your journey, the deeply personal lessons learned from navigating the healthcare system as a parent and caregiver, and for challenging us to think differently about reliability, leadership, and change. I'm grateful for your honesty and your insight, and I hope this conversation leaves our listeners feeling both validated for their frustrations, but motivated to take that next meaningful step forward. That's a wrap for this episode of Be Seen and Friends. Don't miss what's next. Subscribe, share, and join the conversation by scanning the QR code for learn updates in this episode blog. Got a topic you'd like us to cover? You can drop us a line at bcn@bcn.org. I'm Holly Briggs with Michael Dexter, and we're proud to celebrate your dedication to nursing across the emergency spectrum. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected. We are out.